I started using SUBbraid about probably getting on for 2 years ago now. I'd always wanted to use braid, you know, I'd heard loads of stuff about it, but by the time I sort of really started to think about bullet braid, which was the sort of most popular one at the time, that had sort of disappeared and it wasn't in existence anymore. So it took a while, but eventually Korda decided to do a braid. It again was a sinking braid like the bullet was, and I sort of lapped it up straight away. I think I was the first one at Korda to start using it. As soon as it came in, I was all over it, and I haven't really looked back since. You know, the only time I don't use it now is if it's banned. Yeah, braid can be a funny one, you know, like all braids can, win knots and stuff like that, but once you get used to it, it's, you know, it's quite easy to get your head around. One of the first things I'll always do when I turn up is wet the spool. You know, if the braid's on the real dry, you can get wind knots. If you wet it, generally, you know, no problems whatsoever. So that's an important thing. And the other issue that most people would talk about is hook pulls and stuff like that. Now, I've always played my fish like a girl. Everyone says that to me, so maybe me personally, you know, I've never had a hook pull on it as far as I'm aware. I can't remember a time I've dropped a fish on it. So yeah, you know, I've not had that issue, but I use it on soft rods a lot. But more recently, I've started to use it on 3.5 pound Tesco rods as well, and I've had no dramas whatsoever. And I had a fluorocarbon leader of about 15 to 18 foot, and that just gives me a cushion, you know. Braid has no stretch whatsoever, but in a fluorocarbon line, there is a bit of stretch, and that just gives you a little bit of cushion while you're playing a fish. And you know, it's made a big difference, and like I say, I've not dropped a fish yet. The good thing about braid was that I can do so much with it. You know, I don't have to use a marker rod. Everything's so accurate, everything's so precise, and you know, when I'm spot finding, what I do with the marker rod, it's great, isn't it? You know, we use a marker rod because we can't do it with our fishing rods, but when you've got braided mainline on your fishing rods, they're basically free marker rods, and I can be so precise with my rig placement. You know, there's no popping the float up and all that. It's just clip it up to exactly where you want it to be, clip a rig on and fire it straight out there. Simply feeling the lead down. We're all really into feeling the lead down. It's a vital part of everything. And braid, you know, is 10 times better for that than mono. Snag fishing, it's 10 times better. It's just, there's so many reasons why braid is good. And it pretty much is in every single area of carp fishing. Line lay is really important to me, always has been. And braid, well, this braid in particular, SUBbraid, sinks really well. You know, once it's under the water, it just sinks and sinks and sinks. If you keep paying line out, it will sink until it's on the bottom completely. And because it's so supple, unlike a fluorocarbon example, which I used a lot because of the sinking properties, the braid sits over the bottom even better than fluoro does. Fluoro is really heavy, but it's not as supple as braid. Braid is so supple, and if you leave that rod in the rest for a while without the bobbin clipped on, just keep paying line out until you'll see the line picking up. Once that stops happening, the braid is pinned to the bottom. You know, if you leave it there for an hour, clip the bobbin on, your line is absolutely perfect. And when you're reeling in the morning and stuff, you can feel it. You can feel the braid hugging the bottom where it's sunk from the rod tip right out to the spot. And, you know, and the fish have absolutely no idea you're even in the swim. Indication on braid is obviously better as well. I've never been one, I'm not that bothered about bite indication. You know, I fish so slack most of the time that by the time it registers on the alarm, the fish is moving anyway. But you know, if you are into bite indication, if that's something you do pay a lot of attention to, then you're not going to bet a braid. It is just instant with that stuff because there's no stretch at all. Just like when you feel the lead down, indication then is great, and when you get a bite, it's exactly the same. It's just spot on every single time. One of the best situations, you know, when I would say the braid really does stand out, like head and shoulders above a mono or a fluorocarbon, is when you're snag fishing, particularly longer range. Because there's no stretch whatsoever, you know, you can clip up to the trees, really tight to them, get as tight as you like really, inch by inch, you can go closer and closer. It's never going to stretch and land in the tree like it does with mono or fluoro. And you know, when you're hooking those fish, because there's no stretch in the braid, if you're on it and you're pulling back hard enough to turn them, they will turn quickly. Whereas with a mono or a fluoro, the stretch in the line alone is sometimes enough for them to get into the snag. So when I'm snag fishing, you know, I would never ever use a mono or fluoro ever again. It would be braid all the way for me in that situation. The first samples of SUBbraid that we got through were like a light brown colour. We did have a few different samples over the sort of year or so that I was first using it. Kept changing it, tweaking it. We've now settled on what it's like a blacky green type colour, which I find is the sort of best all-round camo. And I really like the colour, you know. It was something I was worried about at the start. When I first got them brown samples for us, thinking, oh, I don't really like this colour. But the one we've got now, to me, is absolutely perfect. The 20 is great for, you know, you can get over 100 yards with a 20, and a 15, a little bit thinner again, and you can go, you know, past 100 yards with that. So I would use a SUBbraid in a breaking strain that suits the fishing I'm trying to do, and I find the 20 to be a nice sort of all-rounder. It means I can go anywhere with it and fish pretty much where I need to be.